So my top five players growing up, number five was Dan Marino. You have to remember, like when he was playing for the Dolphins, they were really kind of America's team. So even though I was in Michigan, everybody knew who the Dolphins were. Everybody loved the teal and orange of the Dolphins, and he was Dan the man. So he was definitely one of my top players growing up. Number four, I'm going to go with the Tigers. Alan Trammell, loved the Tigers growing up. The first professional sporting event I ever went to was at Tiger Stadium, and Alan Trammell was actually one of my favorites, who I got to meet later on down the road when he was an assistant with the Chicago Cubs and they were in town. So that was definitely a highlight for me. Number three, I'm going with Isaiah Thomas. I know a lot of people don't like him right now, the MJ documentary coming out, but he was the epitome of those Detroit Pistons bad boys teams, and just one of my absolute all-time favorite players. And number two, all-time favorite growing up was wide receiver Johnnie Morton. He was actually probably the first athlete I really, and maybe only athlete I've really ever had a crush on, and the only one that I had his like picture framed up on my wall, even when I went to college, actually. So he was my favorite, not just because he was a great receiver, but because he was also quite pretty. But my number one favorite player all time growing up was the one and only Barry Sanders. I mean, what more do you need to say? He actually, I think, is the reason I fell in love with football. The reason I fell in love with sports was watching him. He was so elusive, and he was just this Detroit sports icon. And some of my fondest memories as a child are on Sundays and Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house, watching him play, my uncle screaming at the television because the Lions were usually losing, but he was always a highlight, and by far my favorite player of all time, really.